Hi, this video will show you how to set up a quiz. So first step, on Are You Connected and on your page, obviously, turn editing on. Scroll down to the section where you would like to add the quiz. Say Add Activity Resource. Look for the quiz in the Activity section. Click Select it and say Add. So first one is to name your quiz. I'm going to call it Quiz 1. Again, the description block is where you could add information for students, and I think it is always useful to at least say what work would be covered, what are the sorry, there I typed it. What are the due dates? All right, start and due date. And also if you have a time limit. It's always bad now, everybody sees how bad I type. You can decide to display this on the course page. I generally don't. Not for our page now, because it's just going to create a bit of clutter. The next section is timing. Now we need to decide when do we want it to start and when do we want it to end. And this is absolute time. So once that passes, it's gone, and we would need to give students access. And I'll show you in a separate video how to do that. Okay, the next section is time limit. Do we want to give our students a time limit? And you'll see it only becomes available if I enable as well. So if I want everybody to complete this in 10 minutes, it would be as simple as that. This one is a very important one. And I think there's a lot of confusion around what happens when time expires. Automatically, it's set up to say attempts must be submitted before time expires, or they're not counted. So, what would happen in this instance is a student would start their quiz, and let's say they started it at 5:02, and the quiz ends at 12 o'clock on the hour. That means they only have 5 minutes. And 5 minutes in, it would just not let them complete. Then there is give them a grace period when it opens. So that open attempts can be submitted, but no more questions answered. So let's say on the due time, the question that they are now, they'll be able to answer, but they won't get any new ones. Then there's the most, I don't want to say draconian one, but the one that is mostly used is open attempts are submitted automatically. So when it hits the due date or the due time, it actually just submits whatever students have put in. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not a very diplomatic one to say let them finish the attempt, but yeah, I think generally a lot of lecturers use this one, and again, that's why we communicate our due times. Then we can also enable grace periods, but we'll see that is only applicable when we say the grace period when opening attempts. So here we can drill down to hours, minutes, seconds. So we can say give them 10 minutes, just past that, and then they'll at least have another 10 minutes. So if a student starts at 1 minute before the due date, they'll have 10 minutes to actually complete. But if we put in the time limit, it'll still just give them that 10 minutes. So if the time limit is 5 minutes and they start 1 minute to, they'll only get an additional 4 minutes. So they'll be able to attempt their quiz within that time limit, right? So I think that's probably the easiest and most probably the best way that we can set it up. Okay, then if we get to the grade, Again, we can add grade categories in our gradebook if we want our gradebook to calculate our marks for us automatically. Um, this one is probably one that sometimes gets missed out on. Is the attempts allowed? So we can set up quizzes for students just to exercise and practice. Then we can set them to unlimited. So students can do and do and do that until, kingdom come. Or we can say you've got one attempt. But you'll see that the grading method then changes. So if we have really complex quizzes that we would want students to try a second or a third time, grading method actually becomes available, and we can, if we click down on that, and remember, anything that we're not sure of, next to grading method we have the question mark. If we hit the question mark, it'll tell us exactly what the options are. So we can have highest grade, the highest that they score, the average, the mean of all grades, first attempt, all others are ignored, or last attempt, all others are ignored. So we can use different approaches. I'm going to put mine on unlimited because we can just try it when we want. Then layout, and I'm going to activate the show more. This new page, we can decide to populate every question on a new page, or all questions on one page. And I think I don't think there is a best practice. I tend to just say every question. For instance, if we have 50 questions on one page can become quite overwhelming. So I tend to just put every question on its own separate page, get students to focus on that one question and not read the rest. Then navigation. This is also quite a controversial button. At the moment, if we say free, let's say we've got 5 questions, students are able to move between any of the 5. If we say sequential, it means students will move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And sequential actually means that they won't be able to retry 1 or 2. So once they pass through, that's it. So they've got one shot. And again, if you decide on using that, please communicate it here. Is it sequential? And maybe don't say sequential, but just explain to students that they'll only have one shot to answer each question. Changes the stakes a bit. All right, then question behavior. Do we want to shuffle within questions? We can say yes, but here if we click this, if enabled, it makes parts of questions randomly shuffled, provided it's enabled in the question settings itself. So we'll talk about this in the next video, but if this is selected, it will shuffle options, which I think could be useful. Again, here is another show more, but how questions behave, deferred feedback, adaptive penalties, etc. I think the easiest one to use is deferred feedback. So students submit their essay and submit their quiz, pardon me, submit their quiz and are able to then go back and see where they've done, where they've got it right and where they've got it wrong after, or depending on how we set up the quiz, when they can actually do that. We have options to do negative marking and so on within this. Again, depending on what we select here, we can also allow redo within attempts, and this would change the way in which a redo would be affected, and here negative marking could also then be activated. Each attempt builds on the last. What this really means is that it's going to show students where they did right, and that they only need to work on those that they got wrong. So there's quite a bit that we can do with question behavior, and here's the important one. And deferred feedback then impacts on this review options. If we actually tick these during the attempt, they'll actually see if they're right or wrong as they do the quiz. Here we've set it to immediately after attempt. It will show them the attempt, whether correct, and their marks. We'll see in questions a specific and general feedback. We can show them the right answer. So if they have it wrong, we can show them the right one, and we have overall feedback per question that we can set as well. So let's say we want our students to only see this afterwards. After the quiz is closed, so after the due date, we'll select the options here. This would be immediately after the attempt. So let's say it's a one for a let's say it's a quiz for marks. We generally won't put this up because then it can be shared among students, which we don't want. And the same here, if it's high, if it's stakes and it's for marks, we will generally show them here. And I mean, at the moment, as it's set up, we won't get any feedback at all. But I'm going to set it that people can see the attempt, whether correct, the marks, the specific feedback, the general feedback, the right answer, and the overall feedback. Because this quiz that we're designing now will be available on the course page, so you can actually go through it. Okay, then appearance. Show user's picture. I tend to say no image. It's just a data thing, so that people can see it's them that signed in, but I think they should know that. So I'll generally keep no image. Decimal places in grades. If you're working with round numbers, put it to 0. Otherwise, students get a mark of 10 out of 10.00 out of 10.00. So if you don't have fractional grades, just put it up as round numbers. Yeah, there is a show more. So decimal places in question grades. Same for overall grades. Again, you can put in decimal points if you'd like. Here we've set it at 0, so that's not going to matter. Then if we go to extra restrictions, and I think this is very useful, we can put in a password if we'd like. So we can restrict students to actually use a password. We can also require a network address. This is a bit more complex because we would need the IP addresses of computers in, for instance, the computer lab, if we want them to write it there. But in our context now, I don't think this network address is going to be ideal. Then we can also enforce, if we've selected multiple attempts, or which we have, we can force people to, or students to, wait a day or wait a week before they can retry it, and even between later attempts. So if we have 3 attempts, we can say, well, you need to wait an hour before you can do it again. Browser security, even though this is not foolproof, I would always say put it up. You know, no system is unbeatable. But if we put in JavaScript, for the time being, it would at least just protect the information. So screen grabs should not work, but as I say, it's not foolproof. Then overall feedback. This is feedback that we can give students based on a grade boundary. So if they get 100%, well done, that is amazing, right? We can then give another grade boundary 50% and say, awesome, you have passed. Obviously, you would use different wording around this. We can open up more attempts. Sorry. Can open up more options, so that grade boundary among 40%, oh, not $40, 40%. we could say, we can say great attempt, keep up the hard work, and do your readings. It will become easier. All right, and so forth. So we're actually able to give individual feedback based on grade boundaries. So, for instance, if we go lower, if we know that the work that we're doing is around a specific reading, we can say, go back, read this reading. We can attach the reading, and so on. And then if we go to common module settings, again, we can say, do we want it shown? Do we want separate groups to have access? And I think generally quizzes are set for entire classes, so you don't generally want to use group settings. But again, if you have a large class of 1,000 people, and you have groups set up on Are You Connected, it could be useful to review certain groups. So you could say activate separate groups. Then again, restrict access. If we have group set up, that would be an option where you can restrict only group 1 needs to do this quiz or whatever we would like to do. We can prevent access from dates. This is quite useful because if we activate this, it's like this quiz doesn't exist between the dates that we've selected. And we can also add a restriction set where they need to be in a group within a date, or they need to have had a specific grade in a previous quiz. So it can become a quiz for learning, as such. But yeah, then we have set it up, we say save and return to course. Thank you.